Have you ever tried to build a fire? Now, I mean a really big fire. Well, if you built a big fire, did you ever start by trying to put water on it first? Well, Elijah did. So let's see what the story is.
Where we left off at part 1, Elijah was to go to Ahab. During this time, Ahab had been hunting for Elijah. It would have been easier to meet Ahab if the rain would have come, but Elijah was to go see Ahab before the rain came. There was still a drought and famine in the land. During this time, Jezebel had been killing off hundreds of God's prophets. Some went into hiding. Once, when Jezebel had tried to kill all the Lord's prophets, Obadiah has hidden 100 of them in 2 caves. He put 50 prophets in each cave and supplied them with food and water. You see, Elijah was not the only believer in God in the land. Obadiah was in charge of the palace, and while Jezebel had been killing off the Lord's prophets, God raised up Obadiah right under her nose. Just when we might think there are no more believers around, we often discover that God has raised up surprising people in unexpected places. Verses 7 and 8. As Obadiah was walking along, he suddenly saw Elijah coming toward him. Obadiah recognized him at once and bowed low to the ground before him. "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" he asked. "Yes, it is," Elijah replied. "Now go and tell your master Elijah is here." You see, there's no accidental meetings when the Lord is concerned. In earlier verses, Obadiah and Ahab were searching for grass to feed the animals during this drought so they would not have to slaughter them for food. They went in separate directions, and Obadiah runs into Elijah. What a surprise, since Ahab had been looking for Elijah for 3 years. You can see the respect that Obadiah showed Elijah, but now imagine that request. In verses 9 and 12, "O sir," Obadiah protested, "what harm have I done to you, that you are sending me to my death at the hands of Ahab? But as soon as I leave you, the Spirit of the Lord will carry you away, to who knows where. When Ahab comes and cannot find you, he will kill me." See, Obadiah panics. He realizes the danger if he tells Ahab about Elijah, and when Ahab comes, there is no Elijah. We probably can imagine the power of a king had in those days over the life of someone who served them. Take a few moments to read verses 9 through 14 to see the panic of Obadiah. Listen to his excuses. First, what did I do to deserve this? Second, Ahab had every nation and kingdom looking for you, and if they could not find you, they had to swear you were not there. And now you are asking me to tell Ahab you are here? And what about if you leave? He will kill me. Fourth, look what I did. I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets and fed them. See, look what I did. But Elijah said, "I swear by the Lord Almighty, in whose presence I stand, that I will present myself to Ahab this very day." You see, Elijah assures Obadiah that he will appear to Ahab that very day. Notice that the wording is the same as when Elijah told Ahab that it would not rain. It was kind of like an oath. So Obadiah went to tell Ahab, and Elijah had come, and Ahab went out to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw him, he exclaimed, "So, is it really you, you troublemaker of Israel?" When Ahab met with Elijah, he said, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" That's in the NIV. Maybe Ahab thought more bad news was coming. It looks like Ahab went to see Elijah and not that Elijah went to the king's palace. It gave Elijah a little bit of safety. How often are God's people called troublers when they follow God's commands rather than that of the culture? This meeting must have had some tension in it for sure. Verses 18 and 19. "I have made no trouble for Israel," Elijah replied. "You and your family are the troublemakers, for you have refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped the images of Baal instead. Now summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel. along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who are supported by Jezebel. What nerve! What boldness! Elijah told the truth. That could have cost him his life. But maybe after 3 years of drought, Ahab may have second thoughts about killing Elijah, and maybe he should listen to him. Doesn't it seem that someone who really causes the problems likes to blame someone else? Many years ago, when I was going to a mainline church, the preacher gave a sermon that was a little confrontational. I thought it was good, and we need that kind. Maybe not all the time, but at least once in a while. On the way out, I heard someone say, "I don't need that. I come to church to feel good." See, then Elijah tells Ahab to gather together the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah to meet him on Mount Carmel. Verses 20 and 21. So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets of Mount Carmel. Then Elijah stood in front of them and said, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." But the people were completely silent. Isn't it strange that as much as Ahab wanted to get Elijah and probably kill him, that now he did what Elijah asked? He gathered everyone at Mount Carmel. It probably took days to gather everyone from all parts of Israel. Meanwhile, Elijah gives the Israelites one last time to change their ways and come back to God. Elijah gave them a challenge. And look how they answered. Silence. Could they possibly be held by fear? Why they did not make a move? Think about today, and if people were called to make a decision, what reasons might they give for their non-response? Fear of what might happen if they do make that move? Maybe not moved by the challenge? Maybe just lack of concern? Maybe you know of some other answers. Verses 22 to 24. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they wish to cut into pieces and lay it on the wood of their altar, but without setting fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God. I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God." And all the people agreed. Now Elijah lays out the challenge to the other priests. The other prophets will cut and place a bull on the wood, and I will do the same with a second bull, but do not set fire to it. Sounds fair. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Finally, the people had something to say. They agreed. This seems fair. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "You go first, for there are many of you. Choose one of the bulls and prepare it, and call on the name of your God, but do not set fire to the wood." So they prepared one of the bulls and placed it on the altar. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noontime, shouting, "O Baal, answer us!" But there was no reply of any kind. Then they danced, hobbling around the altar they had made. The prophets of Baal went first. Notice that Elijah did not preach to them like he did to the Israelites. And they probably didn't want to hear anything from him either. And they were only there because the king commanded them to. Either they hated Elijah or they didn't take him seriously. So from 9 until noon, they called upon Baal to light the fire. What a sight that was. Verses 27 to 29. About noontime, Elijah began mocking them. "You'll have to shout louder," he scoffed, "for surely he is a god. Perhaps he is daydreaming or relieving himself, or maybe he is away on a trip and needs to be awakened." So they shouted louder, and following their normal custom, they cut themselves with knives and swords until blood gushed out. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice, but still there was no sound, no reply, no response. Elijah now begins to taunt them. This shows that he must have had a sense of humor. Elijah had to be laughing inside, if not out loud. It must have been some spectacle, and Elijah was just sitting, waiting for his turn. Relieving himself was a nice way of saying he's sitting on the toilet. Now it's almost time for the evening sacrifice, and you can just imagine Elijah saying, "Are you finished yet?" Verses 30 to 33a. Then Elijah called to the people, "Come over here." They all crowded around him as he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, and he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold about 3 gallons. He piled wood on the altar, cut the bull into pieces, and laid the pieces on the wood. The Message puts it this way. Then Elijah told the people, "Enough of that, it's my turn." Elijah had the people take 12 stones to build an altar and prepared the bull and the wood. He had a trench dug around the altar. Why would you need a trench? Verses 33b to 35. After they had done this, he said, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour the water over all the offering and the wood." After they had done this, he said, "Do the same thing again." And when they were finished, he said, "Now do it a 3rd time." So they did it as he said, and the water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. He had the people fill 4 large jars and pour it on the offering. Then he said, "Do it again." And then do it a 3rd time. I'm sure at this point the people weren't too sure what Elijah was doing. But he wanted to make sure that what was about to happen would have no natural explanation. At the usual time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have brought them back to yourself." Elijah prayed. Immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. So, the fire came down and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. Fire doesn't come down, it goes up. Verses 39 and 40. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He is God. Yes, the Lord is God." Then Elijah commanded, "Seize all the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one escape." So the people seized them all. And Elijah took them down to the Kishon Valley and killed them there. The people fell face down on the ground. I'll bet they did. The Bible doesn't say anything here about the prophets of Baal, but you can imagine how probably they reacted by what they saw. Elijah did not give them time to recover. He gave the order, and the people gathered all the prophets of Baal and Asherah, and it said Elijah killed all 850 of them. I wonder what Ahab was doing through all of this. Verses 41 and 42. Then Elijah said to Ahab, "Go get something to eat and drink, for I hear a mighty rainstorm coming." So Ahab went to eat and drink. See, it's not over yet. He told Ahab to eat and drink because he hears rain. Whether it's the smell of rain or the sound of rain, sometimes we experience these before the rain actually gets here. Interesting that when he tells Ahab to eat and drink, that Ahab actually does that. Probably after he saw the fire come down from the sky, he'll do whatever Elijah says. But Elijah does not stop to eat and drink. He goes to pray. So the second half here of verse 42, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel and bowed low to the ground and prayed with his face between his knees. Then he said to his servant, "Go and look out toward the sea." The servant went and looked, then returned to Elijah and said, "I didn't see anything." 7 times Elijah told him to go back and look. Maybe Elijah was expecting the rain to come right way after his first prayer. Sound familiar? How many times do you have to pray for results? Once? Twice? 7? Sorry, I don't have an answer for that. I think we are to pray constantly. His servant went to look to the east for the rain. 6 times the servant went to look, but no rain. So verses 44 to 46. Finally, the 7th time his servant told him, "I saw a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea." Then Elijah shouted, "Hurry to Ahab and tell him, 'Climb into your chariot and go back home. If you don't hurry, the rain will stop you.' And soon the sky was black with clouds. A heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm, and Ahab left quickly for Jezreel. Then the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. On the seventh time, the clouds began to form, and a heavy rain began to fall. This was going to be a heavy rain that probably would have made travel by chariot impossible. The next part is hard to imagine. Elijah tucked his cloak and ran? If you saw the movie The Incredibles, this scene must have looked a little like Dash running. And Ahab must have had a strange look on his face when he saw this old man just passing him by.
Well, that's it for this time, How Not to Build a Fire, part 2. Next time we go to part 3, and we'll get to see how Elijah gets to travel somewhere on an entirely new form of transportation. So we'll see you in part 3. That's it for part 2.